New York has been stepping up its enforcement of vaccine mandates. On Monday, unvaxxed healthcare workers started getting fired from hospitals. New York City teachers have until Friday to get the jab or lose their jobs, and the hammer is reportedly falling on members of the NYPD. New York Post reported that some unvaccinated undercover cops have allegedly been threatened with demotion because they can't set up stings in restaurants without a vaccination card. At least 10 officers and detectives were told by the Deputy Commissioner of Internal Affairs they would be kicked back to the precinct if they don't get the shot. There's no vaccination mandate in the NYPD, so what's going on here? Let's ask former NYPD officer and conservative commentator and TV host John Cardillo. Mr. Cardillo, good to see you.
Hey, Buck, always good to be with you.
So, what's going on here with, first of all, just to explain to people, it's not a minor thing, right? If you're undercover, I mean, you get demoted and sent back to the precinct. That's pretty tough medicine. What's happening here?
Yeah, it really is. It's a good point you brought up. So a couple of things to unpack here, Buck. First and foremost, these are internal affairs cops, officers, and detectives. So we'll get to that in a moment. Part of the reason this is so devastating for a cop who's not yet promoted to detective, in the NYPD, the career track is 18 months in an investigative unit to be promoted up to detective, to get your gold shield, right? And that's a route cops want to go. It's prestigious. It's the fun work. It's the good stuff, the interesting stuff. If these cops are bounced back to their commands, their patrol commands, they lose all that time. They'd have to start over again, probably go work a tedious narcotics investigative detail in an area that maybe a very bad area, dangerous area. That's part one. The other problem is if they're bounced back to the command, they're pariahs because they came from internal affairs. No one is going to want to work with them. No one is going to be inviting them out for drinks or dinner after work. You know, in the NYPD, they call internal affairs the rat squad. And then look, they do good work. They get rid of corrupt cops. There's the criminal impersonation unit. They don't even go after cops. They go after people out there doing robberies who impersonate cops, but you still have that internal affairs stigma on you. So it's pretty draconian, in my opinion, what the Deputy Commissioner of Internal Affairs, Resnick, is doing. And I have to say, it's just one more command failure of NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea.
And so what is the status, just so we know? I mean, healthcare workers, obviously, and teachers in New York City are under mandate to get the shot or else. But the NYPD overall is currently not. But if you're in the undercover situation we just talked about, then you might suffer professional consequences, but not termination. Is that where it stands? And is there a concern, John, that the mandate, the actual get the shot or you're gone, may apply to the NYPD? Or are they going to be able to avoid that?
Yeah, I think they'll be able to avoid it because the PBA, the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, Police Benevolent Association now, the Sergeants, BA, et cetera, they're pretty strong unions. A lot of lobbying power, a lot of money, a lot of political power. But the Internal Affairs Bureau is being targeted specifically, Buck, because historically, when they make cases against dirty cops, a lot of those stings and a lot of the corruption happens in or around licensed premises, what we call licensed premises, simply put, bars and restaurants. And the logic here is that if they're not vaxxed and they're undercover, if they walk into one of these licensed premises, bar, restaurant, they're asked for proof of vaccination and can't provide it, creates a bit of a scene. It might give up who they are to the suspect, the subject that they're tailing. So that's the department's excuse for singling out internal affairs for this one. Because of the power of the unions and Detectives Endowment Association, a little bit larger, very powerful, I don't expect you're going to see a mandate agency-wide. But it's John, New York City, who knows?
Yeah, I also want to get your take on something you and I have been talking about since it started in June of 2020, but now the official numbers. We've been seeing the early numbers for some time, but the FBI has got its annual crime report out. It showed murders rose sharply across the country in 2020. I mean, the biggest single-year increase in homicides since they were started keeping track in the 1960s, 30% increase from the previous year. Just when you see that, John, what's your first thought as a former member of the NYPD who carried a shield and a badge and had to deal with the realities on the streets?
Well, look, I mean, I came in, I graduated the academy under David Dinkins, worked for a little bit under Dinkins, terrible mayor, and saw, I tell people this story all the time, Buck. We didn't see crime reduction in months or years after Rudy Giuliani was inaugurated in January of 94. We saw it in weeks. And it wasn't because they were afraid of Giuliani. It was because the bad guys knew free reign was over. They know that they have nothing but free reign. And so the FBI every year, for the viewers, listeners who don't know, put out what's called the UCR, Uniform Crime Reporting. And about 99%, high 98 percentile of departments from around the country report all their numbers up. Interestingly, when this report came out, New York City, Chicago, and New Orleans had not yet reported. So expect that 30% number to rise once the NYC and Chicago and New Orleans numbers start rolling in. This is not just a public safety crisis now. This is a public health crisis. Young Black men in particular are killing and being incarcerated or being killed. According to these new numbers, when you reconcile these numbers against the U.S. Census Bureau, about young Black men 18 to 24 are either being killed or killing and being incarcerated at rates 20 to 22 times their representation in the population. And the Democratic politicians who race bait like nobody else, they couldn't care less.
John, it's amazing to me that it seems just an acceptance among the corporate media and the Democrat Party of moving on as though we didn't just run this horrific experiment in what defund the police would actually mean for the American people, and notably, disproportionately, for people of color in major American cities. How do we force accountability on this? I mean, it feels like everybody who went on TV in June, July, August, September of 2020 should be invited back on and have to defend what was a narrative that resulted in more people being killed and murdered.
Oh, sure. Yeah, look, you know the most frustrating part about this, Buck? I had dinner at 9/11, 20th anniversary. I was at the dinner that hosted by Rudy Giuliani and Bernie Kerik, former police commissioner Kerik. He's a good friend of mine. We talk about this several times a week. The most frustrating part for anybody who's worked in law enforcement is there's no great mystery how to solve this. We know how to solve it. Redeploy Rudy Giuliani strategies, redeploy Bill Bratton, Howard Safer, Bernie Kerik strategies. Even Bill Bratton, when he went to LAPD after NYPD, he reduced crime. We know what to do here. Put your plainclothes units that go after illegal guns, that go after robberies. Robberies are the wellspring of all crime. They often result in homicide. Unhandcuff the police. Stop and frisk is constitutional. There was one radically liberal judge in New York City, Shira Scheindlin, who ruled it unconstitutional. The only reason stop and frisk is deemed incorrectly unconstitutional in New York is her decision was never appealed by the de Blasio administration. But it flies in the face of Supreme Court precedent. Terry v. Ohio in 1964. A simple appeal would have resulted in stop and frisk being redeployed in New York, lives being saved. I talked about this with former police commissioner Ray Kelly. Had lunch with him a couple of months ago down here in Florida. We know exactly what to do, but the Democratic politicians will not do it. They would rather see the bodies stacking on the streets than admit they were wrong. Only the media can hold them accountable, and the corporate media will not do it.
John Cardillo, always good to see you, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Bud.
Candidates for Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin squared off in their final debate last night, during which Democrat McAuliffe had some interesting things to say about the role of parents in their children's education. When we come back, the host of Counterculture on the Epoch Times, Danielle D'Souza Gill, stops by to give her take. Let's talk about my digital money for a moment. Everybody's getting into crypto these days, it feels like, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, so many digital tokens out there. And how do you get started? It's not easy, right? Well, that's where my digital money comes in. This is an easy-to-use, self-trading crypto IRA platform with incredible customer service. They'll actually answer the phone when you call them, and they'll help you get started. They also offer unparalleled military-grade security for the coins you buy, a play money account so you can test the markets without real risk, and also the best customer service you'll get anywhere. The crypto market is heating up, and this could be a great time to get into crypto if you've never done it before. Try them at mydigitalmoney.com. Again, that's mydigitalmoney.com. We'll be right back with more Hold the Line.